Well, we'll start. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Dave Aronberg. That's Melba Pearson, a.k.a. the resident legal diva, who's becoming so popular, she even has a Substack of her own. Tell them,
Yep.
Melba.
Hello, at Resident Legal Diva. And yes, wait, I just saw somebody mention, yes, Lenore, yes, President Carter. Absolutely. I stand corrected. He was a good man with solid values. So yes, happy President Carter and Obama Day.
And I see Glenn Kirshner has joined us. Glenn, we've got to do a duet. I don't know how to add more people to this, but in fact, hold on here.
I'm
We're gonna
like,
add we're gonna
have
add Glenn
patience with,
Kirshner.
it's like, have
Let's add
patience with
Glenn.
your auntie and uncle as we figure this out.
I'm
Let's see if
gonna
they drop
yes.
into Wells.
I'm gonna add Glenn because Glenn always has interesting things to say. Let's see. So, and by the way, thank you everyone for joining us on this holiday. We want to talk Epstein because Melba correctly noted that Naomi Campbell, yes, that Naomi Campbell has appeared in the Epstein files and she is scrambling. And we are here for the truth. We're not trying to say that just because you're in the Epstein files that you are a pedophile.
Correct.
But there's a lot of smoke there amongst a lot of people. And by the way, the fact that Trump's administration is putting out that, well, Janis Joplin, Elvis Presley, and who else? Like all these celebrities who were either dead when Epstein committed his crimes, or where Epstein was like 18 years old when Janis Joplin died. I mean, come on. That is what happens in the law as a lawyer when you try to bury documents in a pile. You send trucks over to the other side's house, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack. That's what they're trying to do here.
Seriously.
So we'll say hello again. I'm Dave Aronberg, a.k.a. the Florida Lawman here on Substack. That's Melba Pearson, a.k.a. resident legal diva. And let's talk, Melba, about the latest revelations in the Epstein files. Naomi Campbell, her name appears, doesn't mean she engaged in these illegal sex acts, the pedophilia, but her name appears. You want to take it from there, Melba?
Yeah. So I was horrified when I opened my eyes this morning to see the New York Times reporting on Naomi Campbell's name appearing in the Epstein files. Now, the context in which her name appeared was more so emails back and forth. Clearly not anything procuring girls or anything along those lines, but more so, hey, let me get a ride on the jet, or hey, I'll get you tickets to whatever big event going on, or her assistant, hey, I know you're friends with Naomi, Jeffrey Epstein. How about you and Ghislaine come to her surprise birthday party, right? So those types of things, it shows that there was a friendship between the two of them. Of course, she was like, well, after he was convicted in 2008, I stayed away from him. Well, the emails say something different. Now, in this last instance, once everything came out, right, in 2018, 2019, yes, she distanced herself, but then he was dead not too long after. So I don't put that much credence in it. I'm more looking at in 2008, when there was that first shot across the bow, when it's like, oh, he's messing with minors. That should have been your sign to cut and run. The fact you were still speaking to him after that, I didn't like that. But at the same token, I'm not saying she's a pedophile. I'm saying that she may have enabled or turned a blind eye, or giving her the full benefit of the doubt, she missed signs. So maybe he didn't prance young girls out in front of her, but there may have been something that she just didn't put two and two together. I don't know.
Well, Melba, we're fortunate to be joined by Justice Matters, Glenn Kirshner. And Glenn, are you as upset as we are when you see these celebrities continue to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein after his child pedophilia convictions? And because the thing with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, apparently they did indeed break ties after Epstein was convicted. And we make this big deal of Bill Clinton. But what about all these other celebrities, many of them in the MAGA universe, who continue to befriend someone who had been convicted of child sex crimes?
Yeah. First of all, nice to meet you, Melba. And Dave, thank you for letting me be an interloper here. The only reason I'm not in my studio is because I just had a plumber come to the house. So I open up Substack. I'm like, hey, look, Dave and Melba are on live. Let me jump on. And I was just, I didn't do my makeup, my hair. I was just expecting to listen to you guys and learn. So listen, Yes, it's upsetting, it's infuriating, it's disqualifying. If you're hanging around with a pedophile, with a convicted sex offender, you've got real judgment problems at a minimum. Am I surprised that the rich and the powerful and the connected and the influential tend to, care more about money and status than anything else, so they continue to be willing to engage and socialize with a guy like this? I guess it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I've said over and over, and Dave, you and I have talked about this, for whatever reason, our government, and this goes for Republicans and Democrats, don't have an appetite to hold the ruling class criminals accountable. And that is what it so upsets me, that these Epstein files, and now the more we're seeing of what appear to be credible reports of suspected crimes, apparently went uninvestigated by Trump 1, by the Biden administration, by Trump 2, and maybe even before the Biden administration. That I don't understand. And when I saw that email traffic from 2019 between and among federal prosecutors, that's my tribe, for better or worse, the federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office saying, okay, we've got 10 co-conspirators of Epstein identified. Now let's put a strategy in place to step to them, to deal with them. If it were me, I would have said to hold them accountable if the evidence, shows that they committed crimes. And what did we get with respect to those 10 co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein? We got crickets. We got no accountability. And the second thing is, I don't mean to filibuster, when the Epstein files dropped, the most recent 3 million, document strong batch, we saw repercussions around the world. We
Yes.
almost instantly saw
Mhm.
the UK law enforcement authorities get search warrants for Lord, I don't like calling the dude Lord, Peter Mandelson. And
Mhm.
they're executing search warrants. They're launching criminal investigations of powerful people. And what are we doing? We're doing nothing, because Pam Bondi is
Mm.
corrupt to her core, and she's got to go, whether by resignation, firing and removal, or impeachment. She's got to go. I don't know who in the world we get coming up behind her, and it may not be any better, but that doesn't matter. She's disqualified herself as an honest broker of the law and as the nation's top law enforcement official. She wouldn't turn around and even acknowledge the pain of the victims who sat behind her at that congressional hearing. That's disqualifying. That's not the way we career prosecutors treat victims. We are there to serve the victims and to address their victimization and try to give them something that approximates justice. She turned her back on them both literally and figuratively.
And oh my God, Glenn, that was a whole word, a whole sermon. Amen and hallelujah. Okay, because this was it's a former prosecutor. We know this is a firing offense.
Yeah.
If I, as was a line prosecutor, treated a survivor of sexual violence that way, I would be packing my office up by the end of that day, if not by the end of the hearing. Like, you get fired for that kind of stuff. So you already know that that's just not how you comport yourself. And then on top of that, where is your humanity? These were children. And now there are grown women standing behind you. And you have the ability to ease some of their pain. And you keep your back to them? Like, you have no business calling yourself a prosecutor. You have no business calling yourself a human. You are just disgusting. And you should be ashamed. Your family should be ashamed. And you should, like, just get from around us and just go somewhere. Because that, and I'm heated about it because I am, I was a domestic violence prosecutor. I'm really big on gender-based violence. And I'm also a survivor of both sexual assault and domestic violence. So to see Pam Bondi, who is holding so much power, and she's sitting there fanning herself and just ignoring their pain. Don't let me catch her outside.
Well, for anyone who expected any member of the Trump administration to apologize to Epstein victims, you don't know MAGA. MAGA means never having to say you're sorry. In fact, if you did say you're sorry, you'd be out. Trump wants people to be loyal to him. It's an audience of one, it's a party of one. And that means it's not just agree with him on his policies, but also in his tone. He doesn't want conciliation, he wants confrontation. That's why they gave her this burn book, and she utilized it against all these members of Congress, which had nothing to do with child sex trafficking. It was just a burn against them. And then the voices got heated and raised, and it was just an awful situation. I do want to take you back to Naomi Campbell for a second, in that Naomi Campbell said her defense is that she didn't know about Epstein's prior arrest in 2008, his plea deal, didn't know. And her lawyer added that she was living in Moscow from 2018 to 2013, so had no idea that Epstein was a registered sex offender. First off, what is she doing living in Moscow? Is that a thing?
And did she vacation in North Korea? I'm just curious.
Right? When I saw that, I'm like, ooh, that didn't make it better. You were kicking it with Putin during that time? Like, girl, what you doing?
It's like the WWE had a wrestler who was from Bulgaria, and people didn't hate Bulgaria, so they wanted to make him more evil. So they said he now resides in Moscow, Russia. You're like, oh, okay, boo, boo. Why would you volunteer this if you're Naomi Campbell? What is that about?
You're like, darling, I was in my mansion in Ibiza. I was not aware of what was going on. Man, I could have taken that, but hi, I was in Moscow. Girl. More questions.
Yeah, well, one document that they found was entitled "List of People Who Need J.E.'s Address," and it lists Miss Campbell and several other people under a set of instructions how to mail letters, postcards, and books to the Florida jail where Epstein began serving his sentence in the summer of 2008. So there you go. I mean, obviously, she must have known something, right?
It wasn't much of a sentence. It was more like kind of sleepover at the jail when it works for your schedule, you know.
Have lunch. Have lunch at the jail. And then you can go on about your way. It's just, I'm struggling here because I'm thinking about Giselle Pellicot. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the story of this amazing, brave woman out of France who discovered that her husband had been drugging her and basically inviting men to come over and sexually assault her. And she just finished giving a very heart-wrenching interview with, I believe it was the New York Times as well. And her story galvanized all of France to the point that people were coming to the trial, from all around the country with signs being like, I stand with Madame Pellicot, justice for, Giselle. And her whole thing was that if I want survivors to say, and this is a quote from her, I'm paraphrasing slightly, and of course there's translation, but she wanted people to know that if Madame Pellicot, can stand up and do this and be brave, you can too. And I just want that for the Epstein survivors. I want that day of reckoning for them to be able to say, okay, finally, this chapter is closed. I now can work on my healing. And that's what Giselle Pellicot somewhat has, because again, investigations are continuing. There's some of the men that attacked her. She does not know who they are because again, she was drugged. So, I'm looking at that and looking at the Me Too and the accountability that's happening overseas. And I just want that for our survivors here.
Yes.
And yeah.
And when you
go ahead.
It seems to me, and I'd be curious to see if you all agree with this, it feels like people are being galvanized behind these Epstein files release. I mean, even MAGA voices are, for example, lashing out at Bondi and calling for her resignation, which is great, but that doesn't really move us in the direction of accountability for what was done to the Epstein survivors. And, there was another moment during the hearing when I think it was Jamie Raskin who asked, how many of you in the audience, the survivors, requested a meeting with DOJ? And every one of them raised their hands. He said, how many of you received a meeting after requesting it? And every one of them put their hands down. First of all, the work you did as a domestic violence prosecutor, I mean, I was a homicide guy for 22 of my 30 years as a prosecutor. However, there were a fair number of domestic violence murders in D.C. And then I was our office's point person on the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board. And we would sit there and we would do an autopsy on every circumstance where the victim had been abused, had been assaulted, and there is this unmistakable pattern. You're the expert, not me, on this kind of stuff, but where you could just see the escalation of the violence, and you could see how the victims were often scared to continue to participate in the process because they thought then they would, be harmed even more severely by the perpetrator. Or I can't tell you how many victims would say, Mr. Kirshner, if I testify against him, I'm going to be out in the street. My kids are going to be out in the street. We're going to be in a shelter. You know what happens to kids in shelters. And, to see that we have these identified victims who are screaming for accountability, and the attorney general and the deputy attorney general, who is just as bad, Todd Blanche,
Mhm.
are disrespectful, are demeaning, they're kind of evil. That's the word that comes to mind. If
Mhm.
you're not there to address the victims of these horrific crimes, what the hell are you there for? And I think Dave pegged it. You're there to do dear leader's bidding, to cover up anything that might harm him, to deflect and misdirect. I never told any of the victims that I dealt with over the years, I know what happened to you is horrible, but have you seen the recent Dow numbers?
I I
Yeah, that was a real misstep.
mm.
That's gonna go down in history. Also, as I wanna wrap up here, Alyssa has a very interesting question along these lines. If Alyssa said, "Do you think Pambana will be held in inherent contempt?" The answer is no, as far as the inherent contempt powers of Congress, which have not been used for around 100 years. The House doesn't have its own jail. That power has withered on the vine. There is the power of contempt of Congress, which is a little different, which is where you make a referral to the Department of Justice to prosecute. So that ain't happening. So the way to ensure compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act is to go to a judge and to ask a judge to appoint a special master and then hold individuals in contempt if they violate the court's orders. The way that the members of Congress did it previously, Adam Klasfeld and I, Glenn, were skeptical of it because they went to a existing judge who was dealing with a Ghislaine Maxwell grand jury transcript issue. That's not the way to do it. You got to create your own case, file your own motion separately. Don't glom on to something that was not directly relevant, directly involved in this matter. And so I do think there are avenues, but the biggest thing is in November when there is a blue wave and then all of a sudden the Democrats win control of the House, then you'll see hearings, then you'll see some real investigations, I think, to get to the bottom of what happened. Melba, you want the last word?
I was just actually checking to see because I see some discussion in the chat as to who asked the Epstein survivors to raise their hands. And I was just making sure we had the right person. It seems that it was Representative Jayapal who. Jayapal? I hope I'm
That's
pronouncing it
right.
correctly. Yeah, was the one to ask the survivors to raise their hands. So
Yeah.
want to make sure that because it was brought up in the chat, I want to make sure that we're giving accurate stuff. But
And I'm always happy when people correct me because I am so often wrong.
you know,
I'll bet both of you have had the experience where I would I did nothing but trials for 30 years. I never left the courtroom, and I never wanted to leave the courtroom. And I would make a mistake in every single trial, and then I would own up to it in front of the jury. You know what? Ladies and gentlemen, I think I misspoke, and I
Mhm.
want to make sure it's clear. I meant witness 2 and not witness 3. And you know what that does? It gives you added
It's incredible.
credibility. Oh, you're not full of yourself. You can admit, kind of like Donald Trump is always admitting his mistakes, right?
right. That's why I love this platform because they have a sophisticated audience and they're here for the truth and facts. They don't want to hear confirmation bias, that we're never wrong. Yeah, we make mistakes and we get called out for it. So thank you to everyone who joined us for this live Substack. That's Melba Pearson, the resident legal diva. And we're so honored to be joined with Glenn Kirshner by Glenn Kirshner from Justice Matters. Glenn, tell them where they can find you, not that they don't already know.
Right here. This is the platform. Independent media is the wave of the present, not the wave of the future. It's why I left MSNBC. I left my contract, even though I'm creeping back and doing an occasional appearance, unpaid, on corporate media. But right here, 8:30 p.m. every night, we do a community meeting. We've got a great group of community members, justice warriors, and now I'm going to have to invite Melba to join us one of these nights.
Would love to. It's great meeting you.
Yeah,
You too.
Glenn, Melba is a rising star of the streaming world. She's always been a star, though. She and I known each other here in South Florida, but she doesn't call herself Florida woman. She's better than that. She's a resident legal diva. I'm the Florida lawman. No, so thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you here on Substack next time.